Thanks everybody for coming. Appreciate it. Again, I'm Daren Anderson, Deputy City Manager and CFO. This is Mr. Chad Jedlic. He's our Director of Real Estate, Economic Development, and Land Development. And we were the ones intricately involved in the proposal that we're going to go through today. So in November of 2025, the Board of Directors of REAL received an unsolicited offer from Brandt to purchase and operate certain city-owned facilities located on the REAL campus. City administration, REAL administration, and Brandt have negotiated a non-binding term sheet by which Brandt is prepared to purchase these facilities at full market price and operate portions of the REAL campus. Our recommendation to proceed with this transaction is going to Executive Committee of Council on April 29th. We are having this press briefing today to walk you through the major terms of the deal and the value it represents for taxpayers. We will have time for questions following the presentation. The opportunity in front of us is about playgrounds. It's about tax relief. It's about our Cole Avenue, libraries, North Central revitalization, water infrastructure, and community grants. It's about what we decide is best for taxpayer dollars. This slide details the assets proposed to be sold. It shows their purchase price and related costs of capital maintenance the taxpayers are currently responsible for. The purchase price plus the transfer of the costs to bring the facilities back to expected condition gives us total taxpayer value for the transaction. The total value to taxpayers is $85 million. The assets being sold have an average age of over 45 years and have deteriorated and require extensive, costly repairs. It would take a very large investment to bring them up to standard, and some of the buildings are functionally obsolete as their design no longer meets current market demands. So how did the city determine the purchase price? That is very complex. But the core of it is that the city engaged expert accredited professionals to determine a range of market values for these facilities, and Brandt agreed to purchase at the top of that range, getting full market value and maximizing taxpayer return. I'll leave this up there. As you will notice, the purchase price of the Brandt Centre and the Agrivision building are negative. This means the amount of repairs required on the buildings is greater than the appraised value. The Brandt Centre was built in the late 70s and is coming to the point where major work is required to keep the facility operating. This is a large risk to taxpayers. In addition to the $85 million in taxpayer value, this transaction will also reduce the taxpayer subsidies currently paid for operation of the campus. This will reduce the taxpayer subsidies by $115,000 per week, or $6 million per year. Significant savings that council can use for other priorities. Together, the operating and capital cash flow savings are $79 million over the next 5 years. It is $300,000 per week over that time frame. And this will hold beyond 5 years. This is equivalent to a reduction in the mill rate of 8%. As administration, we believe that $300,000 a week can create tremendous community good. To ensure the purchaser shows its commitment to the campus and the revitalization of the buildings they are purchasing, it is required to invest a minimum of $15 million within 24 months. Attracting this type of investment into these facilities will be a welcome to everyone who uses it and visits the site. It will help us put our best foot forward for the upcoming 2027 Grey Cup. The majority of activity programmed by local sporting organizations occurs in the buildings retained by the city and will remain unaffected. In the Queensbury Centre, the city and Brandt will have a lease agreement to ensure that the main floor use for soccer remains unaffected. Brandt will ensure the campus continues to host recreational, cultural, sporting, entertainment, convention, agribusiness, and other special events, such as Canadian Western Agribition. Brandt will operate the Queen City X as long as it is commercially viable and there's demand for the event in the community. This map shows the boundary, the land and buildings included in the proposed sale. I believe you have a copy of it in your background. The proposal provides for an orderly transition of operations from real, ensuring stability for staff, facility users, and organizers of upcoming events. We ensured during negotiations to take into account the best way forward for employees at Real and believe that meets this hurdle. The city can enter into direct negotiations on real estate when there is an exceptional opportunity. However, it still requires council approval through a public process. We believe this is an exceptional opportunity because it maintains a connected campus for hosting rec, culture, sports, entertainment, convention, and other special events. Provides an orderly transition of the purchased assets and operations of Real that protects employees and existing event bookings, with Brandt assuming contractual obligations for hosting events, existing leases, collective bargaining agreements, and service providers such as Levy. This eliminates city liability for deferred maintenance and capital investment on the assets with an average age of 45 years, and by extension, which the city has no current funding plan or funding source. Brandt is uniquely positioned and motivated to execute on this proposal. This is about priorities. The city's official debt plan has $13 million of capacity. Our capital reserves are forecasted to be near zero in 4 years, and every day we add to our large deferred maintenance liability. This unique opportunity will lessen the burden on taxpayers and attract millions of dollars of private investment. Next steps are to take this report to Executive Committee on Wednesday, April 29th, and then to City Council on May 6th. This will allow 2 opportunities for the public to provide comment prior to City Council making its decision. With that, we are open to questions.
Why does Brandt want to buy this stuff?
I was going to say through the chair.
Not that formal.
I would encourage you to ask Brandt that question, but I would say they are highly motivated to make that space even better than it is today. So they're one of the major tenants of that space right now, through ownership of the Regina Pats and the 99-year lease they have on the Agribition building. And they see the challenges that the city has with that property, and have saw an opportunity for them to invest in the properties and bring the level of service up to something that them and their employees and customers that they bring into the city would appreciate.
Well, what's this going to mean for plans for a new arena down the road? Is it pushed back, off the table, or what are we looking at?
No, so this doesn't impact anything around a new arena. I would say there's nothing going on about a new arena right now, but this would not impact that. There is a clause in here where if the city decided to do a new arena that would directly compete with the Brandt Centre, and Brandt wasn't involved, we would then have to purchase the Brandt Centre back. Obviously, it's a unique asset that cities don't have 2 arenas. So they need to protect that. If they're going to put significant investment into this building, they want to make sure that the city doesn't swoop in and create a new spot. But it doesn't impact the new stuff at all.
So this puts an end to Real as an entity, is that correct?
No, so obviously a lot of steps to go through here. This is a non-binding term sheet at this point. So lots of things to address long term. but all the employees, I'll say this, through the agreement, all the employees will be offered employment and switch over to Brandt this year. So, but the organization of Real will still exist until the city decides what to do with it.
But just to be clear, Real would then only be responsible for the assets that the city maintains control over, correct?
So part of this agreement, due to the complexity of the site itself, because it's so self-connected and it was built over probably 100 years, we really need, and our desire as a city to keep it as one functioning unit. Part of this deal is that the agreement the city has with Real to operate the facilities that we're retaining will go to Brandt. Okay, and so and then they will have all of the employees that do that work, right? This is not something that Brandt does currently, so they'll be relying on all the current employees to continue that work for them. But we will be transitioning the agreements from Real to Brandt if this deal is approved. What we will do though is shorten the time frame. So right now I think Real's agreement with the city is for 40 years, and we would shorten that to 30 months. And it just allows the city time to think about what it wants to do with its own city-run facilities at that time.
What happens with Brandt's lease agreement for where it's going to build the distillery, sports music venue? Because he's going to own that land then, right? So how does that work?
Correct. So yeah, he would own his own lease. So he would most likely terminate the lease with himself and just own the building, and then put in whatever tenant improvements or owner improvements that he wants.
Is the value of the lease factored into this purchase?
Yes. So one of the reasons that the value of that building, so I don't know how technical I want to get, but when we valued these facilities and used an expert external person, they used a discounted cash flow methodology. They used 3, but the value of the lease payments is less than the expected cost. That's why it's sitting at a negative value. So the lease itself actually isn't at market. But so he will now own that lease. So I assume that Brandt would eliminate the lease and just take ownership of the building.
That's the same for the Brandt Centre too, right?
Sorry?
Is that the same for the Brandt Centre?
Well,
Like the Pats have a lease in the Brandt Centre, and these one.
currently they're negotiating a lease, so I believe the lease expired, but it's a lot different. They rent certain amounts of ice there. They the lease that's at the Agribition building right now is a 99-year lease for the entirety of the building. That's fundamentally different than what the Regina Pats have at the Brandt Centre.
When was the last time the deferred maintenance was assessed, for all of the Real buildings? I know that there was one that was a few years old, but when was the last time anyone assessed the current deferred maintenance?
So I'll pass it over to Mr. Jedlic to go through what we call our VFA process and timing around that.
So within the last year, the city had conducted a full assessment of the facilities at Real through an external consultant, and so that's what we'll refer to as the VFA report. And the results of that were consistent with a previous report in 2019. It was a facility condition assessment prepared by Stantec Consulting.
So was the cost of deferred maintenance, had it increased in time from 2019 to last year, or was it the same?
It's increased, and if you sort of track that against sort of inflation increase in costs, it's where one would expect it to be without any sort of significant investments having been made since that last report.
So what was the dollar figure? Do you have that?
It's so of the purchase of the buildings we are proposing to sell, specifically the deferred maintenance is $73 million. So that's current. So that would be an assessment of what work would be required to get it up to standard, a good standard today.
And why making that agreement today? What's the reason behind doing that purchase on 2026 and not before?
So this all kicked off with an unsolicited offer from Brandt So Brandt approached the Real Board with an offer to buy buildings. At that time, because the City of Regina owned the facilities, we were brought in to negotiate to see if there was an opportunity. These are facilities again that have significant deferred maintenance, are used for commercial activities, but a difficult business to be in. And so that's why now is that we got an unsolicited offer.
When Brandt approached the city in November 2025, was it for these properties or has that changed?
The original offer was not these facilities. So during negotiations, very complex obviously, and things changed, but it wasn't for these facilities specifically.
Okay. And can you say why it was these facilities? It sounded like more community-focused facilities were retained by the city, but can you just explain that?
Yeah, so important for us, obviously the ITC is an important building that got funding partners from the province, from the feds, and we're very welcome to that. It's a new facility, high use on the community, as well as the hockey rinks and the soccer center. So from a community standpoint, those are businesses that the city is in, right? Like we have hockey rinks, we do lots of rec services, mostly for kids in the city. So we felt important that we retain ownership of those facilities. For the other facilities, they are primarily for commercial purposes. And REAL's mandate has been to operate them in a commercially self-sustaining and viable operation at market pricing. We felt that given the pressures on taxpayers, if someone in the private sector wanted to take the risk on of running a business like that, we felt it was an opportunity for us to strongly look at, and ultimately came to a deal that we felt was great for taxpayers and we can recommend to council.
Were there things Brandt wanted to buy that the city wasn't interested in selling here?
I would say no, like originally, no. The conversations, obviously over 5 months, you have a lot of conversations. The connectedness of the buildings make this deal very unique, and the various age of all the buildings. So we discussed lots and lots of different things, but again, I will reiterate that the city was very intent on keeping the buildings we feel provide the most community good.
They also are the newest buildings, is it fair to say, so they probably have the least amount of significant maintenance in the near future?
Correct, yes. So they are much newer. I believe the average age of the buildings we're retaining is 14 years, whereas the ones that we are looking to sell is over 45.
What will this mean for, if you said this, I missed it, for Agribition and for the exhibition? Like it said here that Brandt will be running the exhibition, but that was like Real's function. Like what will Real's role be in those events? And especially like with Agribition, how much sort of control will the city still have, or influence will the city still have over that?
So Agribition isn't run by Real or the city, it's run by the Canadian Western Agribition Association. Sorry, and maybe I'll pass it over to Mr. Jedlic because he's more familiar with that event.
Yeah, certainly. So Queen City X is put together and run by Real. And so with all of the employees from Real proposed to transfer to Brandt, then Brandt would take on that role of organizing and operating QCX, and there's been lots of discussion about that event and its importance to community. Likewise with Agribition, it's a tremendously important event and organization for our community, and so within the agreement, there's lots of protections around ensuring that event is able to operate, and that event is different than QCX in the sense that it's an independent organization that has an agreement with Real to rent the campus during the show.
So that would move on to Brandt now, and
Yes.
they would be responsible for whether or not that happens.
Yes, and that's one of the key sort of elements of this deal is that any existing contractual obligations and event bookings are honored by the purchaser.
as
What
well.
about Farm
sorry.
Progress Show? I didn't see mentioned in here, or it's run by Real, I believe, or the Spring Clam Show. What's the status of that?
So maybe I'll finish Paul's question first, just to add, we were very cognizant of the two events that you just mentioned, and so they're specifically mentioned in this proposal and in the term sheet. And so when you get a chance to go through it, you'll see there are some tax incentives that are available to all businesses that are part of this deal. And what we made sure is that in order to receive those, he's committed to making sure that the Canadian Western Agribition continues to operate and run going forward, as well as the Queen City X. So we were very cognizant of those two events in this deal. To get to Farm Progress, again, if that's a commercially viable show, then I fully expect that Brandt will continue to operate that, but that will be up to his purview. We didn't feel it necessary to ensure that that specific event be listed. We focused more on Queen City X and Canadian Western Agribition.
It says here a partial upgrade to meet an acceptable city standard would cost $39 million, but it also says Brandt is committing to investing at least $15 million in the building within 2 years of purchase. Is that enough to get the buildings up to city standard?
So again, getting into the details of this complex deal, the $39 million, so there is $73 million of deferred maintenance identified through an external expert company. Where we negotiated on, the purchase price was how quickly does that matter and how much does it take away from the appraised value. So we used a process where we negotiated that the appraised value would be deducted by $39 million, essentially. Getting really into the weeds here to get to our purchase price. So that's where the city feels very comfortable, is that we didn't, fully price in the 73. Then we talked a lot about, wanting to make sure that the purchaser has committed to making upgrades to these facilities. And what we feel is that if he can put in $15 million outside of what he's already planned for the Queen City distilleries, that's a significant investment, and that then he is financially incented to continue to use these facilities. Obviously, the Brandt Centre, as he's the major tenant, not the only tenant, but the major tenant of the Brandt Centre, we expect him to have to put in some investment into that building. And I think when you ask him what his plans are, they will outline that. But for us, we're comfortable in that we got full market rates, and we've also got a strong commitment that he's going to invest in these facilities.
I just want to, you said earlier that the lease for the distillery building was below market rate. Is that, according to the assessment that you guys did in assessing the value, is that correct?
So, yes, so technically the value of the lease payments is lower than the expected cost of maintenance for that building, which gets to a negative purchase price and an overall negative market value.
It says here most of the activity programmed by local sporting organizations will remain unaffected. What activities or programs or sports will be affected?
So currently, I believe in the purchased assets here, we have a contract with ICP Volleyball, and so we are going to obviously be speaking with them and working on whether that continues or they'll have to find a facility, a different facility. But we believe that's the only core contract around those types of activities.
This is a fairly unprecedented deal, a public entity selling this amount of buildings to a private company. Has the City of Regina done that before, and where else, has this ever even really happened anywhere before where the city was able to look at, hey, this is how ownership transferred in this other municipality?
Yeah, I would say, in Chad's group, we sell assets all the time. The city takes assets over through tax processes, et cetera, or different things. We have facilities that we no longer use and sell. The scope of this I would say has never been done before, obviously with the size of the campus and the number of assets that are being sold. So I'd say that's unique. You know, we're fortunate, I think, as taxpayers that we have someone willing to put their own private investment into this and take the risk to make this go. Like I said, these buildings operate mostly commercial activities, and so we feel like, given the pressures on the taxpayer right now with the amount of deferred maintenance the city has and the amount of facilities that are coming due, that this was the best way forward for taxpayers.
And, sorry, Alex. With, you mentioned strain on the taxpayer, a lot of that strain has been created by Real. How much did Real's recent history play into wanting to offload some of these assets?
I would say, you know, when we looked at it from an economic development standpoint, we really stepped back and said, what should city taxpayers be putting at risk? There are examples in other cities where assets like this can turn a profit, but it's a very hard business to be in. And I would say our assessment was, you know, more, should taxpayers be taking the risk on facilities like this? They're obviously Real right now has, asked for and received significant taxpayer subsidies. So that plays into, we believe, the value going forward that we've shared here in the $79 million of cost savings for taxpayers over the next 5 years. But I wouldn't say that that was a driving force. It was more, this is a forever deal. And so we wanted to look at it holistically to say, is this a business taxpayer dollars should be investing in? And ultimately, it's administration's opinion that if the private sector wants to step up and take on this risk, we believe it's better suited by the private sector, and we'll leave taxpayer dollars to invest in core assets like parks, playgrounds, roads, infrastructure, all that stuff.
But hasn't the city not, like, the deferred maintenance, that was a decision by Real to not carry out that money, the maintenance, because it didn't have the money. So, and we just haven't continued to do that maintenance. So, I guess, who would you say resulted in the condition of the buildings by the point where we're trying to now sell them? They're under like a certain value. Like,
yeah. So good question. I would say that, you know, we struggle as a city in properly maintaining all of our facilities. We outsourced, as a city organization, we outsourced the maintenance of those facilities to Real and previous organizations before that. And it's a difficult business to generate enough cash flow to properly maintain those buildings. And it's created a significant liability for taxpayers that we feel that's a big part of why this deal makes sense at this time. You know, part of this deal that we're excited about, so the ITC building we are leasing to Brandt to operate. Again, it's one connected facility. They have to pay all the maintenance, all the costs for maintaining it, power, heat, all that stuff. They can then rent it out to recoup those costs. As part of that, we've also added in a payment of $550,000 per year that Brandt has to make to the city that we will put in a reserve for that building. That will grow with inflation over time. Now, if we had done that, and that's sort of best practice for municipalities now. Some municipalities are better at it than others. Regina needs to catch up in that regards. Me as a CFO, I'm very excited that he's agreed to that because it protects the long-term capital maintenance of that facility. If we had been doing that on all of these facilities for the last 30 years, we would have the funds to properly maintain these. But when you don't do that, you end up with this hole. And I would say this isn't unique to Real. This is issues that all of our facilities are trying to deal with, and we always are making hard decisions, and council's making hard decisions every year about how much money to put into maintenance.
So decisions of the past have kind of led us to this point.
Absolutely correct. Like, and again, this is not, you know, a current issue. This is a 50-year issue. That you know, those group of facilities, you know, were put up first in 1884. So this is a long-term situation that we've gotten ourselves into, and we're just fortunate that we have what we feel is a good deal for taxpayers to address it.
Why not list these properties on the market? And is the city not required to do that when selling city-owned assets?
So maybe so the short answer to that is no, we're not, but I'll let Mr. Jedlic speak to why we felt this was a unique enough opportunity to not put it to market.
So I think as you get into the term sheet, you'll see the complexity of the deal. Listing these on the market is not necessarily straightforward. There's successor rights related to union employment. There's a lot of events that are planned for in these facilities, and the strong desire of the city is to keep the primary function of this campus as an interconnected site available to host large events. And so there are lots of strings attached to this deal that focus on that. In terms of our ability, real estate is unique in the sense that we are able to negotiate deals when there's an extraordinary opportunity, and so some past recent examples would be a sale of land to FCL or to Viterra. Now, the negotiations can occur in private. Ultimately, still, it has to come before council and the public for a decision of council, and so that's the step that we're at right now.
Is there a comparable example in Canada of a comparable city, essentially privatizing some or all of a major asset like an exhibition park?
I would say that there's several different structures that municipalities have used to bring private investment and private operation into these types of facilities. Every city is unique, though. If you go look at the agreements Edmonton has with OEG, I think is there. Winnipeg has with True North. Calgary has with the owners of the Flames and stuff. Their corporate names escaping me. They're all unique, right? They're all unique based on the situation. And typically, though, it sort of requires taxpayer subsidy. Unique to this deal, I would say, in Canada is that the proponent here is willing to take on the risk solely, and important for us when we were negotiating this deal was to try and ensure that the taxpayers reduce that liability completely.
At any point before November 2025, did Brandt or Jeff Semple approach the city about purchasing any of the buildings?
Again, not that I'm aware of. I don't know if Mr. Jedlic's aware of it. He didn't mention anything to us that he had, or that they had approached the city at any time prior.
With the original offer, you mentioned there was a different suite of buildings being looked at. Was Brandt looking at buying fewer buildings or more buildings than what we see here?
Fewer.
Fewer. You won't tell us just which specifically?
Oh, there's commercial sensitivities around that. I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of it just due to pricing and all of that stuff. But when you're dealing with a deal as complex as this, it took many turns, I'd say, over the last 5 months.
We can do a couple more questions.
Is the city selling these at a loss?
No. So the purchase price, I don't know if you want to bring back up the slide on the purchase price.
I've looked at a lot of numbers, and I know it's a simplistic question, but I just wanted to be sure.
So here you'll see the purchase price of each individual item, and that's the first column.
Yeah.
So net, we will receive $6.4 million for these. And you see the purchase price that's been negotiated based on, again, full market value. The thing that's unique in this deal is selling the Brandt Centre. There's not a large market for people wanting to buy a facility like the Brandt Centre. When we look at this, we approached this as an asset sale and did all of our due diligence and brought in the experts that we needed to do this. But the truth is, it's not just an asset deal, right? We wanted to make sure CWA was protected, that the Queen City X was going to operate, and all of those things. So, but I will say none of the purchase price gave a discount for that. Brandt is taking that risk on solely. We priced this at full market value, and so we'll get there. There's going to be a lot of accounting noise when this transaction happens, and we've started to look at that in our accounting team, but from our perspective, we're getting top of the market for these assets.
As you said, there's a lot of strings attached. This is a complicated deal. There's a lot of different organizations, teams involved. How much public consultation has already happened with those various players? Will they be learning about this for the first time when it's posted, or have you already been speaking with them? And so far, what's the feedback, if you have?
So we have to be that short answer to that is no. Like, this is a very obviously sensitive, and we have a lot of rules at the city around public letting the public know. I'm just searching for a word here. And so we're following our process as we do with everything else. So most users of this will be aware of it, sort of in a short time frame here. And then, like we said, there'll be time now, it goes through executive committee and council for everyone to come and speak to their councillors and come to exec committee if they feel warranted.
Is there an expiry date on this term sheet? It's dated to April 9th, but does it expire at any point?
No, there isn't. We've sort of looked at a pathway, so there are some dates within the term sheet by which, if council were to approve it, that then we would move into negotiating definitive agreements, and then it's a staged transaction with certain assets changing hands at different times. But negotiating the definitive agreements will probably take 2 months. So.
I'm still fuzzy on the role of REAL going forward. The report mentions the city directly operating cooperators, Affinity Plex, Mosaic. When the dust is all settled, this is all executed, is there still a REAL? Is it maybe operating those assets on the city's behalf?
So, good question. I would say, complex answer in that all of the employees of REAL will go to Brandt at a certain date in the agreement, and I'm forgetting which one. So it'll have no employees. But the city technically the city operates those facilities now. We just paid REAL to do it for us. We are going to start paying Brandt to do it for us. But we might have use for REAL, the organization, in the future. Again, so we don't want to say, yeah, REAL is done now. That's not part of this deal. We will address the organization of REAL at some point in the future. But, we're council to give approval for this deal, and we were to move forward in negotiating the definitive agreements, at some point REAL would have no employees.
We'll do one last question.
Thank you. I'm just curious how much this relates to, city looking at REAL and its financial viability, the review that's been going on for the past couple of months.
Specifically to that review, I would say, while the people doing that are aware of this transaction, it didn't impact what Chad and I were doing. We were looking at, again, when you get an unsolicited offer, it's our fiduciary duty to make sure that the taxpayers' best interests are served. And so that process has been running. It hasn't changed. It's been moving ahead, and we moved ahead with this opportunity. The challenges that REAL has had and the taxpayer subsidies that it requires to run definitely play a role in this. And that's what this is about. This is about whether taxpayer dollars are best served being invested into activities like this, or best served focusing on other core activities that the city does.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay.